Hi, it's Dr. Rod Story with Mere Medicine. Looking forward to being back in the, what do we call this studio here?
The Cross Politics Studio.
The Fight Laugh
Studio. Soon as it's going to be the Fight Laugh Feast Network Studio.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, more avenues to speak truth and love.
Yes, sir.
It's kind of what I wanted to start off talking about today.
Yeah. So we're going to get into the transgender topic today.
Yes, heavy topic. Something that's coming across my desk more and more, and so I feel like it would be wise to take a gander back, mostly from the perspective of why does our clinic not participate in transgendering, or why do we not encourage our kids to be talking about this and exploring all sorts of pronouns or directions? If this is the thing, why are we going the other direction?
So maybe even take a step back there, because you're a Christian doctor.
Yes, sir.
And obviously you are happy to provide medical services to everybody. That's part of your Hippocratic Oath.
Yes, I do not decline care to anybody. I feel like that's consistent with the Scripture's calling in our life. You just have to look at the Good Samaritan to know that even people who we would not normally associate with or spend time with,
right,
that if we see a need, crossing the street to take care of them,
right,
is the utmost calling. And that's absolutely what I've dedicated my life to.
And so, but now you're going to refuse services to someone who would maybe want to transition from male to female or something like that.
Well, that's an interesting question. Refusing services puts it on an onus, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It kind of flips the...
I use that terminology for a reason. Yeah,
well,
right.
We talked a little bit about this. If you listened to the podcast for about 3 weeks ago when we talked about euthanasia and this idea, are physicians just purveyors of technology? Are we just like a vending machine? You come put some money in and you get whatever you want?
Right.
Or are physicians morally responsible for the advice we give, for the decisions we make, for the prescriptions we write, for the skin that we cut? Are we responsible, or is this really just a one size, well, maybe not one size, any size fits anybody?
Yeah.
Basically, you could come and demand whatever you want of a physician.
Okay. And so how are you, maybe start with, how are you thinking about the transgendered, I guess, medical culture?
Yeah. Well, before we kind of get into that, I think there's a bookend of a piece of scripture that I've been mulling on as I've been thinking about this.
Okay.
And it's Ephesians 4. It talks about that we need to speak truth in love to each other. I mentioned that at the beginning of the podcast here. And I think that that's worth talking about, because there's two aspects of the way I want to approach this. I want to be a man that's speaking true words. So as we talk to you today, as we talk to patients in my clinic, it shouldn't be any different. I shouldn't be judging words or twisting them in a way that suddenly is trying to game somebody up.
Okay.
But not only do I want to be truthful, I want to do that in a loving way. And I think that that's fascinating to think about. Sometimes we come across as Christians heavy-handed in our truth, and I think there is a way of speaking truth that is kind to the frame of our listeners, particularly the people who are thinking about transgender. These are people who are already struggling with significant self-doubts and questions about some of the most basic things, essentials to when they look in the mirror.
That's right.
When they look in the mirror, even going, I do not like who I am, or I am broken. I look in the mirror and I say, this is wrong the way I am, and I need to take drastic measures to change this. And that's a pretty rough spot to be in. My heart goes out to those folks, and I think that is part of the reason that it's become such a topic of today. People are seeing these kids, these adults, and going, man, if I was in that spot, I guess I'd reach out for any tool that might fix me. Yeah. And that's the question here. But I think when you use the word truth and love, it kind of begs a couple of questions. Okay. Is there a way of speaking truth that isn't loving? Well, we asked that question. But also, is there a way of speaking falsehood that comes across as loving? Right. And I think that's what we're, by and large, hearing in our culture, from our doctors, from social workers at school, from anyone that's pushing this to kids who are struggling, that they are speaking falsely, and they're doing so, smarming it in a nice thick layer of what sounds loving, but is actually false, and it ultimately is hurtful.
Right.
Then of course you can speak falsehoods in hatred, and man, we just don't want anything to do with those folks. We don't want to be those folks.
Right. And so we're in this crazy world where transgender surgeries are happening all around us now, and especially in our town. Our hospital, I think, is the only hospital in the Northwest
Well, that was the case, as I understand it. Both hospitals in our area that had kind of gone full on to transgender, the surgeon that was using those hospitals to do that care is no longer here. He has his own place that he's working out of, and so for the time being, it has not become quite as much of a hospital setting. But what's fascinating to me, and it came across this weekend, a friend of mine shared just a simple Google map, and all it was a picture of gender affirming clinics.
Yeah.
Basically, places that you could go and
get medication to surgery,
get medication all the way to surgical removal of healthy organs.
Yep.
They showed a map of places that self-declared for that kind of care in 2007, and then they showed just 15 years later, 2022.
Wow!
And the map is crazy. It's just it's in
exploded
a place near you. It used to be just little fringe places, a couple in New York and here and there.
Yep.
But in 15 years, we've gone to making this a neighborhood thing, and that's actually what brought it up for me this week. I had a mom who called, kind of in a desperate circumstance, saying, "My daughter came to her dad. The mom and dad are not together any longer, and said, I want to take hormones." And the mom was just aghast. Where did this come from? You've never talked about this before. What is going on? And only to realize that in the small town where they live, we have a lot of small towns. It began with teachers, social workers, and then it turned out to be a nurse practitioner in a little tiny clinic that said, "Hey, I think you should start doing hormones." Someone with no skill, background, substat, anything. So really, it's in all of our doctors' offices. It's in all the medical literature. It's in all the social media. It's everywhere, and it seems to be held out as this is the answer for what is hurting. This is the answer for when you look in the mirror and you feel lonely, when you feel like you don't fit in, when you feel broken, and it's very concerning. So I want to turn that around, because it's not. I'm not just hearing it from moms who are coming to our office and saying, "Hey, I just want to. Can you talk to my kid? Can you give him a different perspective?" I've had a couple of conversations recently with teenagers who said, "Yeah, this is like every kid in my class has some sort of identity that they've suddenly changed to." To a wife who I know whose husband is beginning to do the transition, and they were church going people as of a couple of years ago, but now suddenly, like, hey, he goes to the doctor, and the doctor says this is normal and right, and I don't know what to think. It's really quite a mind blowing circumstance. So as we talk about these hurting people who are reaching out for answers, I think there's also a double edged sword here. There are people who are pushing this in an ultimate way that I think is very destructive. We'll talk about that.
Have you read Irreversible Damage by Abigail Shrier?
Yes, and if it's hard to get your hands on, because frankly, Amazon keeps denying having this on. Yeah.
So I have it on Audible.
Well, there you go. It's worth listening to, because it's actually not a Christian who wrote it. It's just a concerned medical psychologist who said, "Wow, I am seeing this. All these girls aged 12 to 15 in my office who suddenly are saying, I'm ready to be a man that'll fix me," and talking in detail about some of the irreversible damage, and that's obviously the dog.
Well, and what struck me about reading that book was how first off, she went through just all these stories, of all these different. Largely, it was women transitioning or wanting to transition, and how they were. Basically Ivy League family kind of backgrounds, and then this Ivy League white collar identity crisis that's happening, and they're the ones going through. It's not the ghetto that's doing this.
Well, you and I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and we were called latchkey kids for a reason. Our mom and dads were off working, and we were coming home and watching Scooby-Doo, and maybe if we had been caught at that moment feeling a little bit lonely or estranged or not connected, but when you enter into a very directed social media that says you feel like you don't fit in, or you feel like you're awkward in your body, like every teenager, well, here's the answer, and it is a pretty remarkable thing. So there's about 5 things that I think are worth considering, and that we kind of address in our clinic before we go. Like, man, why is every other clinic seem like it's talking about transgender? Why are all the medical societies doing expert opinions saying this is the right thing, and why is Story Family Medicine and many Christians going the other direction? The first I would say is there's an old adage: if something is new in medicine, you probably ought to wait. So here's the scoop. I am 20 years out of medical school. I went to the University of Washington, one of the most, by many standards, liberal educations in the United States, liberal medical schools, that we were very involved in caring for people who were dealing with homosexuality, people who were dealing with abortion, people who were dealing with all immigrant issues. And it was a remarkably good education and challenging in other ways. But I'll tell you one thing that 20 years ago that we didn't talk about.
Sex. Male and female.
Yeah, because it was a decided issue.
Yeah,
we've known that for ad nauseum and in infinity. It's a basic biological tenet of human anatomy, of human sexuality, that this is not a new thing. So when I was in medical school, there was no discussion or no understanding or conversation about transgender.
Yeah.
20 years ago, and even I would say probably even 10 years ago, they were not teaching actively about this. So why is something suddenly so like the in thing and so medically the right thing to do, and yet it was not even a conversation, not even a consideration?
Because it's obviously driven by culture.
Well, that should make us pause. Yeah. It should make us go, what in the world? Because we're talking about dramatic changes. We're talking about drastic. People often say, is the medicine worse than the cure? In this case, a cure for feeling like you don't fit in your body, or you look in the mirror and you don't like the gender you are. The medicine for it, we're going to talk about it here in a second, is a drastic thing. So, but this is all new. And in medicine, anything that's new, you should probably wait and see if it actually works out, even if the FDA is saying this is good stuff, because frankly, we don't always know the outcome or the or the effect that's going to happen. We're talking about taking boys and encouraging them to change dramatically.
Remove their penis.
Yes.
Serious surgery.
Yeah, serious surgery.
You can't undo that.
You cannot undo that. We're telling women to do the same. And these are not something that suddenly you can kind of change mid-course and say, that medicine had a side effect I didn't like. I don't think I'll continue. This is a whole different direction. This is kind of a shoot for a different planet when you're talking about something straightforward.
So what's number two?
The second is that this is a unique and really concerning way that we're approaching medicine. And it basically is on a perspective of someone's feelings. Medicine prides itself in being evidence-based, in being like, I can test a lab, I can do a panel of things, I can examine you, I can do a number of things, and I can say, okay, based on this evidence, this is what I think is going on with you. Your bone, look at that picture there on the screen, the x-ray shows your bone is broken right there, and this is the advice that I would give to you. There is no evidence for what people are feeling. This is purely on someone's self-awareness, and that is a really dangerous place to be when you're talking about changes that we're going to be getting into deeply, because feelings change. Twitter had a pretty amazing day. They call it detransition day, where hundreds of thousands of, and I'm not making this small, maybe tens of thousands of people were getting on Twitter and were sharing their detransitioning story.
Wow.
People who were saying, I did this, I tried to be the other gender, I took the hormones, I saw the doctors, I did the psychology, I even did the surgery, and now I am going backwards to what I was originally. Because they realized that the end is not as fulfilling, not the fix that they thought it was. And those stories are amazing. And I would encourage people who are thinking, I feel this, I wonder if there's other people. You can go find lots of feelings-based, if you feel this, you must be it. But I would also say, why is it so many are saying the opposite? I felt this, my feelings were wrong, they misled me. And I would say that's just not that's true. Like when we speak to medical doctors, why are we basing our treatments on how people feel? We don't do that in any other place in medicine. That's a very dangerous place to be. In fact, oftentimes doctors are entrusted to tell people, you might feel this way. A good example is looking in the mirror and thinking I'm not skinny enough, and the doctor says, no, you're anorexic.
Yep.
And I'm going to help you. I'm going to even hospitalize you to keep you from continuing on this path because
you will die.
Because what you feel is not the same as what you are.
Right.
And we do that same. We used to do that more and more with euthanasia. If you had a death wish, we would say, that's not consistent with a healthy mind. I'm going to protect you and keep you from your worst emotions. So feelings are not a good basis for medicine. And I would encourage people who are talking this through with their kids, whose kids are expressing these, to explore where those feelings come, and then also to really put them in line of your feelings are this, but what is actually the reality of that mirrors against.
Okay, number 3.
Well, and that is the reality. The reality we talked about is that every portion, every bit of someone's body says whether they are a boy or a girl.
Uh-huh.
And there's no qualms about it. There's no hidden agenda. There's no mix up about it. It is as clear as day. It was clear from the very moment of your conception when you were a tiny one-celled child, and your mom's sperm and your mom's nice. When can you edit that?
Different show, different topic.
Yeah, when your mom's egg and your dad's sperm came together.
That's right.
Which was, again, very clear male, very clear female. Yeah. It wasn't some mixy thing going on, because that's the only way biologically that children are made.
You have to have an egg and you have to have sperm.
And there's all sorts of crazy technology, but it really still begins with a male and a female.
Yep.
And it always will, because that's the necessity of it. And if we start messing with that, we really have gotten into a messy spot.
So give me some more examples of kind of the reality. What do you mean? Obviously, you're pointing to science, some scientific realities.
Yes, well, so
beyond egg and sperm.
Here's one realistic. We know that a lot of kids struggle with this, and it's I think particularly it's been fed by our culture a bit, because it seems to be the in thing to think about. I think people are told you're kind of special if you have these struggles or if you're making this transition, and who doesn't want to be special? But the reality is, and we have amazing amount of studies, huge, well-crafted studies, not the studies that are coming out that are saying, oh, everybody's happy that underdoes this. Those are so fraught with garbage science that people are just looking for what they say or what they think it says. Uh-huh. But these are studies that look at what happens if we just encourage kids to hang in there, and we encourage them to improve their relationships with their parents, and we get them through their teen years. What's amazing is almost everybody reverts back to the gender that they were born with.
Right.
There's no confusion after that point. If you get that 13 to 15-year-old boy through that season, and he grows into the man that his body is built to, and the destiny is built into, that every DNA of every cell is building him towards through puberty, he becomes a man, and these men become satisfied men that are happy with themselves. Right. And the same with women. If we just, and that's one of the crazy things, is the current encouragement is we got to catch these kids long before they go through puberty, so that we don't give them the trauma of puberty.
Right.
It's not trauma; it's the blessing of puberty.
Right.
And it's a puberty that helps them become concretely who they were destined to be.
Well, and basically, you're also just describing what it means to be in Christ. Yeah. Because everyone experiences, hardship, rocky roads, doubts. Not even just about their own, sexuality. We're talking about particularly about sexuality, but you go through crisis of faith. You go through, and you know not to listen to your negative thoughts, not to listen to your feelings. You stand on the rock of Christ. You listen to Jesus through those trials.
These are not lonely or unusual feelings that people have.
Right.
People struggle in all different ways, and they're really spiritual journeys. They're spiritual conversations that we're having about what it is that you're made of. What is it that you're called to be? Yep. Who is it that gave you value?
Right.
What is your purpose in life, and what is that meaning? And you and I are both believers in Christ, and we find that the Word of God gives us a very clean and clear answer, that God made people in a large part for our identity by making them male and female.
Through all the waves and the storms and the ship rocking, we know that Jesus is our rock, and that's why it's kind of tragic in some of these situations where these parents are calling you or and their kid wants to transition, but they never gave them Jesus. They never gave them that rock, so they have. They don't have a foundation to point their kids back to beyond maybe, you're physically a girl or physically a boy. That's as far as they can point them.
The surface issues that we see in the mirror that so many kids are focused on now is not the deep reality.
That's right.
And the deep reality of what is driving people to ask these questions. Am I trapped as a boy in a girl's body, or vice versa? Those are deeper issues often brought on by pretty substantial hardships in a family. I listened to a psychologist that treated many hundreds of kids who were struggling with these thoughts. He was out of Washington University. He's unfortunately lost his job now because he shared his research. His research, by and large, said that these kids needed to be encouraged to get through and hang in there. Secondly, that they almost always came from circumstances of broken relationships, parents who were not together, often a strong or a lacking parental figure, most often dad missing. I mean, we talk about father hunger.
Yeah.
And many of these kids were wanting to avoid becoming the gender that they knew their body was made for, because they saw in that adult form something that they were fearful of. I'll give you an example. It was this doctor shared a conversation that he had with a young girl who she definitely wanted to be a man. And it turned out that every woman in her life that she knew had been abused.
Yeah,
every woman in her life had been run over by men. Every woman in her life had been not a master of their destiny. And she looked at it and said, I don't want to be a woman if that's what womanhood is. I'll be a man because men can choose their destiny.
Right.
Men can not be run over. Men are strong.
Right.
I don't want to be a woman if that's what a woman is. And it's not the matter of being a woman that is broken, but it's the view and the picture that's been made for her.
Right.
And without, as you and I know, without Christ, all images of male and female are really broken.
That's right.
And we fall short.
That's right. All right, number 4.
Yes, sir. Well, and this comes out of, I've treated many transgender patients, not for transgendering, but as a matter of care and kindness through years of working in the emergency room and in the hospital.
Yeah.
And what is remarkable is the amount of medication it takes to try and contravene or
overrule what the body's trying to do. Wow.
Yes, and we're not talking natural levels of hormones. It's not like, oh, hey, you have male pattern hormones, but we're going to start giving you female pattern hormones and normal female pattern. No, you first have to start off with a medication that absolutely blocks the hormones. Want to guess where these medications first came from?
Abortion? I don't know.
No, they came from cancer.
Wow.
And there were medicines that we used to block certain kinds of cancer cells.
Yes. Wow.
So certain kinds of testicular cancer, certain kinds of other hormone-based cancers. These are cancer treatments that now are being used and given to kids to block them from going to puberty. And it's a horrifying use of a medication that was not intended for that.
And it's off label too.
Oh yeah.
So
none of
these
have any label. Yeah. If you've spent the last couple of years looking to the FDA for
label and off-label medication,
all of these meds are off-label. I was actually at a Mayo Clinic conference, an endocrine specialty conference, a week-long conference, where we were talking about all sorts of broken endocrine issues. Hormone issues is what endocrine means. And then there was a couple hours where there was a transgender specialist, and I'm using air quotes here, who began her talk by saying, every medicine I'm going to show you, none of them have any label for use.
Yep.
And just so that we're clear, most of these have significant cancer side effects. So we're talking about this idea of fixing something, but what we're actually doing is using hormones and cancer medications that in a way that was never what they were designed for, to essentially break a healthy body.
Wow.
And that can't be. You have to consider, what are we doing to try and give someone the appearance that they might look like something else, only to put them at risk for significant blood clots. We've talked at times about the risk of perhaps we will in the future about hormone contraception, and that has a slight risk for blood clots. We're talking about using hormones 5 to 10 times that level. The level of blood clotting, and these are often fatal blood clots or very life-threatening blood clots, is very high for these patients.
Wow.
What are we doing? If you're contemplating working with your kids through this question, stop and ask, what is the risk I'm putting my kid at, more than just breaking their natural body hormone patterns, but in really exposing them to significant risks, not only for cancer, but blood clots and other really scary things. They're dangerously high. We would never do these levels of hormones in any other medical condition. In fact, you'd be considered to be in malpractice to be using them on these levels. But we've carved out a whole agenda here that says this is okay. For this purpose of helping someone gain some hair on their chin or stop menstruating, we'll give them these things just because of the way that they feel.
That medication, that is something that no one talks about. In fact, no. Abby Schreier in her book kind of went through several patients that were by the end of their transition, they were worse off medically. And one lady who transitioned to a man, even when she wanted to transition back, she said that I'm just now a lifelong patient is what I've done to my body.
Yes.
And none of the doctors told me about this.
Who are completely healthy and require no medication whatsoever, and we're suddenly 4, 5, 6 medications that you are now stuck on and dependent on a physician to manage for the rest of your life. It is not fixing something that's broken. It's breaking something that never was.
What's number 5?
Well, it's not just the side effects or the risks that come with these medications directly, but we are truly destroying our children's future when we allow them to go through these procedures.
Right.
This is chemical castration.
Yeah.
It leads to physical castration.
Right.
And I'm not using those words lightly. Castration is just a term that means stopping the ability to have children. And castration used to mean the removal of testicles. We did that to prisoners who we considered to be repeat offenders. Yep. But doing that to healthy children who otherwise have normally functioning bodies for the purposes of a cosmetic look is horrific. The lengths that people are going now to try and preserve their fertility, and there was a crazy Netflix movie about he's having a baby kind of thing, and they're snuggling up. That man is woman is a full woman who's now backed off her hormone therapy to try and be able to conceive, but she's had to have in vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization to be able to allow her to have, because she's not naturally ovulating anymore, because we've destroyed that. In fact, a lot of these kids are being urged to sperm bank or
save their sperm or save their eggs because they know they're going to destroy it if they want to have a kid later.
There's no way, no how that you're going to ever be able to have a child. Wow. And that's such an important aspect of being a human, is being able to raise children of your own. It is a gift that we are destroying, and we aren't talking about this. We talk about it like, maybe it's a switch you can turn on or off. The Netflix is kind of trying to make people think, isn't it medical assisted technology wonderful? You can go become a man, you can become a woman, you can vice versa. You can still have that baby down the way. Yeah. These are not stories that glamorize. They're Frankenstein. Type of scenarios.
All right, so two questions before we go here.
Yes, sir.
First is, now you as a Christian doctor believe basically doing a transgender surgery, let's say castrating testicles, doing a transgender bottom surgery is what they'd call it.
Yes, below the belt.
You would refuse those services, but would you at the same time do like some sort of breast augmentation or, some sort of cosmetic surgery? Maybe walk us through kind of some of the principles that might be guiding you through some of that.
Sure. I think that's the slippery slope.
The slippery slope.
Yes, my words get spoonerized here. I think that's the slippery slope that has brought us to this point. We've already have decades and decades of the idea that we can take hormones and we can turn off and turn on fertility. We can do the birth control, and we can have sex without risk of baby or benefit of baby, as I would put it.
Right.
We also have this idea that we can fight the effects of aging. We can change the way we're made, and perhaps be sexier or more lovely in our own eyes. And I have that conversation with a fair number of people who are not talking about transgender, but are just dealing with issues of looking in the mirror and wishing they were something different.
Right.
And I do think it's the same thought issue. Does it mean that you shouldn't have something fixed that may be an injury? Well, I'll give you a couple examples. I have a dear friend who's had breast cancer, and it's left her without breasts, and now she's planning to have some breast augmentation so that she can have some restoration of the curves that she was made for. Right. I think that's a mercy. On the opposite side,
well, also partly what you're getting at there is you're repairing what's broken.
Correct.
When you're cutting off a man's genitals, you're breaking what's working.
Yes.
When you're repairing a woman's breast after a mastectomy, you're making it right with creation and who she was created.
Yes, and all in the aspect of, as we have discussion with believers, this body is like a tent. It's going to be passing away.
That's
it's groaning, and you won't be getting a new one till heaven. But what a glorious day that'll be.
Amen.
I think these are conversations, and we've had a lot of the thought processes, and many of our brothers and sisters have already gone down this line of like, oh, can't I just get a little Botox and get rid of those this and that, or couldn't I spend many hours working out in the gym just to recover some beautiful view of myself, or maybe I should go to that doctor and get a bunch of testosterone so I can have that libido that I had when I was 20. Those are really important conversations as to what is it that's driving that. Is that something that you're finding is a reflection of godliness, or is that something that's a reflection of the culture and the world that's around us?
And are you cutting with God's grain?
Yeah, absolutely.
With who He's created you to be.
That same conversation that we had about speaking truth and love to each other in Ephesians 4, that conversation that Paul is having with the Ephesian church, he says that we have something much bigger than just our gender. We've been called for a purpose. And I think when I talk to these kids, when I talk to these adults, it's purpose that they're looking for, and this world is full of lots of teaching about purpose. In fact, it says that there's winds and waves of doctrine. The actual word there is teachings. That we have all these teachers in our culture that are trying to say, do this, it'll make you feel like you're included. Do that. All the way from, and it's a challenging world for parents who are raising kids in this culture. In Ephesians, it says those teachings are actually human trickery. They're crafty scheming. I do think we have many that are pretending to be speaking truth and love and are actually speaking falsehood with a smarmy coat of sugar syrup. That's ultimately it's causing great harm. So let me encourage you, seek out people who will speak truth to your kids, who will speak truth in love, surround them with Scripture, encourage them to be looking at where their real value and where their real purpose comes from. Seek out doctors who will not be pushing the bottom line or dividing you from your children. In our community, we're just seeing more and more parents coming saying they wouldn't let me even be in the room with my kid. They had the kid fill out a questionnaire saying what is the preferred gender, what's the preferred pronoun. Like this is slippery slope, and when your child reaches a moment that's hard, you may be on the outside.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Story. Very much appreciate it.
And as well, we encourage people to come talk to us. We are very clear that we don't participate in this for many good reasons. That we think medicine is flying right over, but also because we love people and we want to speak faithfully to them, and we're willing to take time. And what we say to the physicians that are encountering this or pushing this, we would say, woe to you. To those kids and parents that are struggling with this, we would say, we love you and we want to walk with you through this.
Thank you. Well, make sure you guys share Mirror Medical. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you share the show, especially with some of your friends who might be dealing with this very topic. So thank you for tuning in. Appreciate it.